Dallas, Texas, named for Jamaica's grandson, Dallas, a great metropolis in the heart of Texas, with over 2.5 million people, is the 12th largest city in the United States. The population of this one city is greater than the population of the entire island of Jamaica. Yet, this great city takes its name from a once prominent Jamaican family who owned several estates in the island at the time when sugar was king. In contrast to the great city of Dallas, Texas, there is a small, almost insignificant village in Jamaica in the southern foothills of the Blue Mountains, which is also named for this family. Dallas, in the parish of St. Andrew, Jamaica, is a quiet rural community whose people earn their living by farming. We don't have the date on this here, sir. All right. Near the village, we don't have the date on it, guys. All right. Near the village of Dallas stands the ruins of the sugar factory and coffee mill of what was the Dallas Castle Estate. And this page was folded, so this sentence damaged, but I'm not gonna read it still. The estate, Kingston, something Harrison. So this Texas city of Dallas was named. Okay. Dr. Robert Dallas, who lived and worked in Kingston during the 18th century, and his wife Sarah Cormack Dallas had 6 children: Robert Charles, Stuart George, Alexander James, Charles Stewart, Henrietta Charlotte, and Elizabeth. Elizabeth. His eldest son, Robert Charles, became an author and was also well known for the assistance he gave to Lord Byron, the poet. The eldest girl, Henrietta Charlotte, married the uncle of the poet Byron. Another son, Stuart, lived in Jamaica and worked for many years as a successful lawyer. Stuart had a son, Samuel, who later became Speaker of the Jamaican House of Assembly. New heading: Business career. It is Doctor Robert Dallas' second son, however, whose name should be most familiar to the readers of American history. Alexander James Dallas was born on June 21, 1759, in Kingston, Jamaica, where he was still a small boy. His parents returned to England. He was educated at Kensington School by private tutors. After completing school, Alexander had a brief business career, during which time he married Arabella Maria Smith, whose father, Major George Smith, sorry, was the commander of Fort George in Jamaica. Fort George, sir. Sir? Uh, okay. After his marriage, after his marriage, Alexander and his wife journeyed to Jamaica to claim his share of his father's estate and to live. His wife's ill health forced him to leave Jamaica after only 2 years for the United States. Leaving Jamaica with $3,000, Alexander and his wife arrived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on June 7th, 1783. During those turbulent years of the Articles of Confederation, the adoption of the federal constitution, the rise of political parties, and of Jeffersonian democracy 8 years after he left Jamaica. He became Secretary of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In 1801, President Jefferson appointed him United States District Attorney for Eastern Pennsylvania, and in 1850 he became Secretary of the Treasury of the United States. Outstanding. The son of Jamaica, Alexander James Dallas, had several children who earned themselves varying degrees of prominence in the United States. Perhaps the most outstanding was George Mifflin Dallas, who was Vice President of the United States from 1844 to 48. George was a Princeton graduate who served America in Europe as secretary to Albert Gallatin at the time of the Treaty of Ghent. Dallas, Texas, is a long way in distance, well size and population from Dallas, Jamaica, but a connection was forged 200 years ago when Alexander James Dallas, son of Kingston physician, left the island for the United States. It was for his second son that the city of Dallas was named. It's kind of tricky one. And this is the next article. I think it's on the Observer. Well, it's Dallas, a great metropolis in the heart of Texas, with over 2.5 million people, is the 12th largest city in the United States. The population, oh, is the same. Is that imprinted twice, sir?
Oh,
Yeah, this print at a different time, but this one a picture, yeah.
mm,
So one old and one new. But thank you, Dallas School. That's the first article. 12 minutes. All right. Um. Overview.
George, Nixon Dallas.
Huh?
He was the one who became vice president.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he was in my
Okay, this is a research by Margaret Curtin, research officer, the Jamaica National Trust Commission, headquarters, 79 Duke Street, Kingston.
and that's one that money,
Yeah.
the commissioner,
Okay.
American money.
Mm. That tape here, sir?
Hmm?
It's a tape here?
Yeah?
It's taping. It's recording here?
Okay.
Yeah, man. Same thing, man. November 8th, 1983. Alright, so these are the one everybody are about. Alright. Dallas District. The District of Dallas is made up of a town of Dallas on the slopes of the Good Hope Mountain, Dallas Mountain, with its summit. Tower Hill at 2,330 feet, and Dallas Castle, the 18th century plantation of the Dallas family, a Scottish family from which the area got its name. Margaret Curtin's a tall lady, eh?
Hmm?
She's short, she's tall, she's brown, she's black cut.
Oh,
Margaret Curtin.
I don't know, I never met him.
Okay.
The commissioner, after all, the commissioner, never met her.
I
What
pen.
Dr.
What you call?
No, it's Neil.
That's a Neil?
It's in her.
Okay, yeah.
He's in the relatives in the nursing home now.
Okay, okay, yeah,
Boy.
yeah. Dallas District can be reached via the St. Thomas Road turning off on the Cane River Road at Bull Bay Police Station. It can also be approached from a northwesterly direction via Elliston Flats and the Hope River. The district is part of the Port Royal Mountains, wow, and is in the parish of St. Andrew. It was, however, once part of the old parish of Port Royal. 1692, when the great earthquake destroyed the town of Port Royal, the parish itself suffered considerably from this disaster. Footnote: Dallas is also the name of a village on the Scottish border. Fear of French invasion during the late 1770s, when the War of American Independence was at its height. French invasion of Jamaica was a grave reality for the planters and merchants of Jamaica. An important defense system was designed to protect Kingston from an assault should the French come in from the sea, move up the Cane River, and attempt to force their way from the mountains to the east into the Ligony Plain. Historic Jamaica from the air provides us with interesting photographs which show just how difficult is the terrain of the Dallas district. Major General Campbell's map of 1782 indicates that both Drummond's Hill, and Dallas Castle. Yeah, continue our pass, sir. Pass on.
No, I can't continue. Just one.
Major General Campbell's map of 1782 indicates that both Drummond's Hill and Dallas Castle were important strongholds in this defense system. On Thornhill Ridge, there were batteries which protected these fortifications. What I read that song?
Go on.
What I read that? Come on. Yeah, Thornhill Ridge. I don't know where that is. Yeah, but them say you say them Drummond's Hill with a apostrophe.
Drummond is owned by Falcons.
Mm, yes. In the Flora flood rains of 1962, the last remaining cannon from this period was washed away. At the National Library of Jamaica, there are copies of just one newspaper that was in circulation during the American War of Independence. This paper, the Jamaica Mercury and Weekly Advertiser, provides us with valuable glimpses of everyday life during the war. In it are some interesting allusions of the French threat. In May 1779, it gave an account of a small French privateer being stranded in the course of her depredations at the Plantain River. End quote.
Sometimes.
And the captain and crew being captured and escorted into Kingston by a detachment of the Windward Horse. The newspaper takes the opportunity to warn the governor of Hispaniola against giving commissions to captains of privateers to raid the Jamaican coastline.
Vegetarian.
In August of the same year, there was another report. French prisoners have been escaping from flags of truce, and the reward of 10 shilling is of 10 slash dash, but no, is offered for each prisoner that is recaptured. Wanted, man.
Mm.
During these years, food supplies were extremely short. The capture of a sloop carrying cold food was a serious matter in the island where starvation was a grim reality on many a plantation. In the same newspaper, there were lists of boats which were taken by the enemy between Port Morant and Bull Bay while transporting plants from St. Thomas in the east to Kingston. This is some identification of how very near to Dallas was was the French threat in the seas off Bull Bay. Jack Manson, or Three Finger Jack. At the same time, while there was threat of French invasion from the sea, in the inaccessible hills and valleys of southeastern flank of the Blue Mountains, single-handedly Jack Manson was terrorizing English soldiers and planters alike. Cane River Falls is supposed to have been his hideaway and the principal scene of his activities between Bull Bay and Grand Spend. He was killed with both machete, musket. Books and plays on his exploits were written and performed in London theatres. This legendary figure was ambushed and killed in 1781.
I'm here.
This legendary figure was ambushed and killed in 1781. Like us, right? She right good.
My quash you off.
Yeah, she right good.
I got 3 months later in time.
Huh?
Near grandfather.
Huh?
Yeah, that catch him with a guy. Quash you off.
Okay, Kwashi Walker catch Three Finger Jack.
Mm.
Guys, put in the comments if you know that Kwashi Walker catch Three Finger Jack.
Quash you off.
At the lay by, huh?
I came.
Kwashi Walker alone.
Mm.
One man.
One on. Knocking out my father.
Don't fall apart. Okay, okay, okay. Oh, then
I can't befriend him.
chicken.
And then chicken.
Mm. Friend, I kill friend. The life you hear they're good to get them play there. Them play the ball in probably can.
I see him run on my
Yeah.
but
Guys in England, anybody in here, London Theatre? See if you can. Huh?
Deeb.
Deeb?
Deeb.
Over there, yeah. Silas. Yeah, what the research, Baba? We want to play. We want the three finger jack player from England. UK massive, big up. Canada, UK, back to it. In the lay-by between milepost 13 and 14 on the St. Thomas Road in the Jamaica National Trust marker commemorating Jack Monson. The unveiling of this marker took place on February of 1976 in the presence of school children from Bull Bay all age. And yeah, that's primary and secondary schools. Huh?
Around what up 14 man.
Okay.
Around place.
Yeah, them some milepost 13 and 14.
Yeah.
What exactly 14 mile?
No man.
Oh, down a fall pass. Okay. Yeah.
But while I put it out there, man, the Henricks had bought all that property and did an open scheme over there.
Yeah.
They wanted to get some name to it.
Okay. Huh.
If they're still on the this, no matter. I'm getting back to that 20 years ago.
Yeah. Me and Rory and Kate up on the highway and I think the sign
Part
still
there.
yeah.
We're looking down to the sea.
Yeah, it look good from there.
I want to tell them about something.
Yeah. The occasion was the start of a campaign by the trust to set up historic markers commemorating famous Jamaican men and women at appropriate sites throughout the island. Arawak remains. Taínos. There are several openings in caves in the Dallas neighborhood, believed to have been the hideout of the legendary Three Finger Jack. More than a decade ago, Arawak remains, bones, pottery were discovered in them by some people looking for their what?
Up by Rickwood.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, big up Beckford. Beckford tell myself this. The Taina village in call it. Them say up so.
They're trying to work on okay. I think George and like so well fine.
Okay. Selvin father find it.
I think it was on
Okay. Big up Selvin, your father find the Taina village up so.
you know, I find things still artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
One of them to write about in this song.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I gave me something about it one time. James number.
Okay, yeah.
On Hacks.
Axe?
Made out of stone.
Axe made it. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. The Cade River Falls. Hackywill, who visited Jamaica in the 1820s, describes the journey to the Cane River Falls and writes that the river is crossed and recrossed more than 20 times.
Yeah. 7 miles.
Quote, the fall is formed by the junction at its head of the Cane River and Lucky Valley rivers, which unite within 100 yards of the spot, from whence they are precipitated into the gulf beneath from a height of somewhat more than 200 feet. The road is tolerably good, having been formed with much labor from the traffic of the mules, end quote. Worthwhile specimens of dolomite are to be found on the side of the steps descending from the road to the base of the falls. In the lower gorge of the Cane River by the mid 1960s, the marl and road metal industry had gone too far for the area to be saved.
There is a lot going on.
Yeah,
There is going.
yeah. For the area to be saved as a beauty spot by the upper portion of the valley and gorge extending back to the Cane River Falls, still on point. At that time, the town planner recommended that the upper gorge should be preserved intact as a watershed and as an open space amenity, possibly for trippers from the corporate area. It was recommended that a suitable pedestrian path should be built along the gorge with a safe viewing platforms arranged here and there so that appropriate views and vistas could be enjoyed.
I know the time you put down.
Hmm?
I know the time you put down.
Yeah. Plans were afoot, but it was learned that the Water Commission intended to abstract water from the Cane River at a point some distance above the falls. And in circumstances, funds for improvement could not be considered. The
Yeah.
trust, huh?
You got money.
They got money?
You got money.
Okay, yeah.
You need to buy, you know, yeah.
On a private something like,
Mm.
huh?
I'm like, well, you want your money to do this.
Oh, okay. The trust expressed its concern at the possible destruction of this area of natural beauty and requested that every effort should be made to find some means of preserving the beauty of the falls. A coffee center, coffee cultivation is the Dallas in sorry, coffee cultivation in the Dallas area goes back to the 18th century. We are told by an early 19th century visitor to Jamaica that this neighborhood abounded, quote, with estates of coffee mountains, end quote. Also, a full description of the cultivation of coffee is given by R.C. Dallas in his History of the Maroons. As Dallas was a member of the family from Dallas Castle, we can suppose that much of what he described must have come first hand from what he knew of coffee cultivation in the Blue Mountains. The quote Bible of Jamaica coffee planters has a book written by P.J. Laborie, 1797, entitled The Coffee Planter of St. Domingo. It was used for nearly a century. Originally, the coffee works were a mile away from the sugar works, but when the first coffee works were washed away, the second works was built nearby the sugar works. At the property, Dallas Castle, there are still fairly well preserved ruins of a two-story coffee mill. There are also traces of at least three stone channels carrying water.
Yeah.
Coffee berries were picked higher up the valley in the Cane River and flushed down these canals to the works. This method may well be unique to the Dallas area. Anybody know where N is in the community? Type it in the comment.
Right, right.
No, I
But
make them guess it, sir. We not tell them. I make them guess it. Everybody know. People know. Ones know. Ones and ones know.
only the situation, when it's long together,
Yeah.
they would buy that year.
Mhm.
Right before this, I won this. And I think if you look at the way, looking at the wash away, side of the road, up the road, and there was another pizza. Very right one could be good have money. I don't know if you know. But we, Angela,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the up there she comes from, that machines are still there,
Yeah.
we go and
Yeah. Another unusual method of transporting coffee was the use of wire ropes to sling the coffee berries down the high slopes. Long after the Dallas family had left the area, Dallas Castle remained an important coffee estate, exporting its produce directly to the United Kingdom. Indeed, in the 1860s, coffee was a very important commercial crop in the Dallas area. Until the early 1930s, individual small farmers dried, pulped, cured, and sold their own crop to merchants who would come to Dallas for this purpose. In the mid 30s, however, the Woodward family began purchasing the coffee for
that's
all
where, and this is getting there now.
mhm, for all the coffee growers in Dallas, and this continued until the commencement of the Second World War. The firm of Lascelles then took over the processing in the 1940s. Today, coffee is still the principal source of income for the people of Dallas. It's coming from 1983. The
Mm.
farming community of Dallas. In the early 20th century, farming was the mainstay of the Dallas district. The community was of sturdy, independent farmers. Bungo peas and cassava were among the crops cultivated by every man who owned a square of land. Planted coffee. It was this crop that they derived income to pay their April taxes. Life was fairly primitive. Cottages still had thatched roofs and walls of wattle and daub, and often there were no floorings. Ovens were of clay and stone, but the younger men in the village were ambitious and self-reliant. Elderly citizens of the community relate how they began, quote, mining themselves during their school days, supporting themselves from the field. From small beginnings, they learned to invest their earnings. From the initial purchase of a pig, a young man might buy a goat, next a cow calf, and later, when he was more established, a donkey. People in Dallas in the early part of the century made their own entertainment. They danced the quadrille and the lancers in the music of the flutina, piccolo, fiddle, and drum. There were bass drums and rocking drums. The dance hall of the district was at Liberty Hall over by Duck Pond District. Woo!
All right, well, son.
Mr. Herman Ricketts of Broadbelt, recalls, right, Broadbelt, no, no, of Broadbelt, recalls Going as a
Boy, I'm going to school.
recalls going as a boy to Wood Gully near Content Gap. He remembered stormy weather in 1933 when no sun shone for 8 days. In the 1951 hurricane, he remembers how during the course of the night the river rose very high at a point called Stafford Hall. When a storm was threatening, it was customary for the government to send men out with flags and a bell to give a storm warning. Older citizens of Dallas recall when they were two Baptist Church, New Bethel was at Freegate, referred to as Christian Church, and the church known as Kedron, the old wall of which can still be seen.
I can't do it.
Shakespeare Woods. From their appearance, many of the older citizens of Dallas learned the events of the 1870s and 1880s. Learned of events in the 1770s and 1880s. Shakespeare Woods. From their appearance, many of the older citizens of Dallas learned of events in the 1870s and 1880s. They remember hearing their parents speak of the mystic Shakespeare Woods, forerunner of Bedward. He lived in the Spanish Town era, but was known to frequent 4 Mile Wood on the St. Thomas Road, near the spot where the original road went down to the coast by Grants Bend. Woods was actually an American. He lived in a cave away from the community and occasionally went out among the people to preach and prophesy. In June 1879, he is said to have prophesied the destruction of the Dallas area by flood. Stone love. In October of that same year, floods did destroy the area. There was loss of life. From their parents, children heard many stories of that disastrous flood by the bell of the Baptist church at Big Bush was washed away. The story goes that bells rings in the river to warn the people of Dallas of impending disaster. Some claim that it was heard tolling before the cloud burst in 1933 and before the hurricane in 1944. Another rap for now. You understand, sir?
I'm going to say, man,
Yeah, it's a bad man. It's a bad. The drought, the drought which followed the flood in the year 1880 was very severe. They heard from their parents of how hungry people had to walk and pick cricket Barnabas to supplement their diet. The citizens spoke to of the revered mango tree believed to be about 150 years old. It was called parish mango or bukutu mango.
you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, yeah. It bears a large variety of the fruit, and the tree is said to have fed the people of Dallas during the hard time of 1880 earthquake. Several of the senior citizens of Dallas have valid memories of January 14, 1907. Garnet Simeon of Plantain Walk had refused to go to school that Monday morning. He relates at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon he felt the first earthquake shock. Quote, the riverbed was rent and the water in it stank. End quote. Then flowed muddy water and the river overflowed its banks. Wow, that's tricky enough. Anyway,
Mm.
he recalls trees being uprooted
Well,
several lands.
Sarah, my sister died.
Okay, Ganga.
Mm. My sister died in
Yeah,
one of her sisters.
yeah.
My grandfather stuff that broke me. His bus. I'm telling you.
He recalls trees being uprooted, several landslides, and the former Wesleyan school being overturned. His immediate reaction was to run as fast as he could, go to his parents at camp level. Another senior citizen, Mr. L.B. Abrams, recalls vividly the scene when teacher Hines, with whip in hand, was pacing up and down the classroom reciting the passage from Isaiah. Quote, out of thee shall a governor that shall rule my people. End quote. Then the first shock came. In the confusion, he remembers hiding behind the blackboard where he was safe. Crowds of anxious parents came up to the school to see if their children were safe. Mr. Abrams remembered how Cyril Robinson, who had been buried alive, was dug out and ran by Jesus. Yeah. Mr. Abrams remembered how Cyril Robinson, who had been buried alive, was dug out and ran bawling all the way home. He never stopped running until he reached his house. They recount too that during the night a tremors continued. Apparently, even Cane River changed its course somewhat as a result of the earthquake. Dallas, an 18th century sugar estate. The Dallas Great House, which was not a large one, was destroyed in the hurricane of 1951. It was situated on the hill. The Jamaica almanacs from 1815 to 33 suggest that the state estate was a fairly substantial one with about 250 slaves. In The History of the Maroons by R.C. Dallas, there is detailed information on sugar cultivation. Presumably, much would have been first-hand knowledge from the Dallas property. There is still the there is still on the property a broad aqueduct leading to the sugar mill. The present modern structure was built on the foundations of the old boiling house. Two pillars on the trash house still remain. The Dallas family. The Dallas name turns up quite frequently in Kingston tax records in the mid 18th century. From these are from these we know that families with the name lived on Duke, Church, and Barry Streets. In Kingston Parish Church, we can still see the grave of a young woman who died when she was only 26 years, 8 months, and 11 days. Her name was Mary Davis Dallas, the wife of Peter Dallas. We know too that a dyer by the name of Alexander Dallas lived at the corner of East Street. He cleaned and dyed coat all sorts of silks, satins, and Persians. End quote. The Jamaica branch of the Dallas family certainly produced many talented members, some of whom were to make their mark in the history of their times. Robert Dallas, the founder of Dallas Castle, was an eminent Scottish physician who practiced in Kingston in 1730 until he returned to Britain in 1765, where he died in 1769. He was a member of the Kingston Vestry and member of the House of Assembly of for Kingston in 1761. Upon his death, his wife remarried. Her new name was Sutherland. In around 1780, she returned to Jamaica with most of her children in order to try to recover some of Dallas' assets, which were fast diminishing. It was over that management of Dallas Castle that Mistress Sutherland and one of her sons, Stuart George Dallas, had a violent quarrel. Eventually, the Dallas family were to lose control of the property altogether. The Dallas sons, Stuart George Dallas, the Dallas sons, Stuart George Dallas, married Elizabeth Jackson, his cousin, who came from a prosperous family in Hanover. He had a son, Samuel Jackson Dallas, who was a custos of Port Royal for many years, 1813 to 1837, and was Speaker of the House from 1842 to 1849. He died in 29 March 1962. Other sons of Stuart and Elizabeth Dallas were Alexander Dallas, physician, and at one time coroner for Port Royal, and Robert Wallen Dallas, rector of Mandeville Parish Church. Alexander James Dallas married Arabella Smith. It is from her memoirs that we learned of the violent family quarrel between her mother-in-law and her brother-in-law. She was the daughter of Major Smith, probably the same Captain Smith who lived at Clifton Mount in St. Andrew. Alexander was attorney at law in Jamaica, but he and Arabella left in 1783 with the proceeds of Major Smith's estate. They settled in Philadelphia, where Alexander became a prominent lawyer and politician, becoming Secretary of the Treasury of the USA in 1814. George Melvin Dallas was their son. He was elected Vice President of the US in 1849. It is after him that Dallas, Texas, and numerous other towns in the USA are named. Numerous other towns. You see, a true master attack. Numerous other towns.
Mm.
Robert Charles Dallas was born in Kingston in 1754. He was baptized on Christmas Day, 1756, in the St. Andrew Parish Church. Educated in England, he came to Jamaica on coming of age to take possession of the estates which he had inherited from his father's death. After 3 years, he visited England, married, and returned to Jamaica with his wife, but eventually he left the island never to return. There was small chance of him ever getting an inheritance from the Dallas properties. His wife's health was impaired by the Jamaica climate. Also, he disliked the social system based as it was on slavery. He died in 1824 at his home in St. Andres, Normandy. In Jamaica, R.C. Dallas is best known as the author of History of the Maroons, in which the writer is sympathetic to the Maroon cause. The book, which is in 2 volumes, was printed by A. Stratham of Printers Street and was published by T. N. Longman and O. Rees of Paternoster Row.
Mm. Young, young. I forget how far. Cat one was the trail.
Obadiah Dane, UK Massive on here. Although the main subject of the book is the Maroons, from their origin to the transportation to Sierra Leone, the book also deals with the estate of the islands at the time and includes, quote, a succinct history of the island. In,
Mm.
in England, R.C. Dallas was very well known in literary circles. Besides a historian, he wrote on a wide variety of subjects. Poem, novels, drama, and pamphlets are among his literary works. Topics varied as the usurpation of the throne of France in remote times. End quote. Usurpation of the throne of France in remote times. End quote. To the natural history of volcanoes were part of his wide interest. R.C. Dallas was an accomplished translator. A small collection of his letters is to be found in the National Library, Jamaica. Today, outside Jamaica, he is remembered for his literary connection to Lord Byron.
That, as he was saying,
Mhm.
Byron seemed to spend some time here.
Yeah,
What I think was noted poet,
yeah.
not Byron.
Connection with Lord Byron.
There's a poem there, man.
We get into
Moving
it.
son.
No matter about it, no matter about it. No. Today, outside Jamaica, okay. Oh yeah, who is the nephew of his sister Charlotte through marriage? Dallas helped George Gordon Byron, sixth Lord, to publish his early poems. Yes, in 1811, Byron wrote a magnificent letter to him concerning plans for the publication of Child Harlot, etc. For 7 years, Dallas, who had much previous experience of publishing, acted as a busy and invaluable literary agent for Byron, and during this time they saw each other frequently. Dallas. So, Child Harold, I don't want to name Child Alpha acquaintance we forgot, I don't want
Yeah.
to.
How well it was, you remember,
Read it again.
every year poem I poem,
It not say it, but it name, them say him help him with Child Harold. Some of figure say it name Child All acquaintance we forgot. So, I don't want that.
yes, and all for that. But I'm moving in my poem, my background. Very moving.
Dallas was a deeply religious man and had hoped that Byron, who was an agnostic, would have been converted. Eventually, their relationship soured and a dispute arose about money. His son, the Reverend A.R.C. Dallas, became an eminent Anglican clergyman, and after his father's death, he published his recollections of the life of Lord Byron.
Then I make up some brand moving poem.
Yeah.
I did a workshop at school. I'm the workshop teacher there. But I remember when I did a research on it. He said he had lived in Dawson.
Yeah.
The house and said that there's no record of him coming here, but he said he came here, managed Dallas Estate, managed the estate here.
Dallas' daughters, Charlotte Dallas, met and married in Barbados. Captain George Hanson Byron, son of famous Admiral John Byron. Their nephew was Lord Byron, 1788 1824.
In the point.
Yeah. Elizabeth Dallas married James Stewart of Stewart Castle Trelawney, yes, who became Custos of Trelawney and representative of the House of Assembly. Another member of the Dallas family, Alexander Dallas, librarian of the Council 1812, mentioned by Condell as librarian for the House of Assembly in Spanish Town. Married Elizabeth Lloyd from England, 20th March 1813. The George William Gordon connection. In about 1839, George William Gordon's father, Joseph Gordon, bought Dallas Castle. In 1845, Gordon Castle, as it was now called, comprised 1,700 acres. Joseph Gordon also owned Orchard Castle, 850 acres, and Bloxburg, 1,300 acres. To his contemporaries, Joseph Gordon was known as, quote, Prince of Attorneys, end quote. During 1839, Joseph Gordon conveyed to William Gordon 10 acres of land at Gordon Castle for £100. And the life of George William Gordon by Ansel Hart. The impression is given that there was a good relationship between the father and his illegitimate son. And, quote, in fact, that the two Gordons were in the assembly together and voted on the same lines is a progressive spirit, end quote. In the preface of the same book, H.P. Jacobs mentioned that, quote, there is in fact little doubt that Joseph Gordon was one of the most progressive members in his class. His belief in the future of the country led him to overextend his activities in agriculture, and his son made a similar mistake. End quote. Eventually, a large part of Dallas Castle estate was sold as small holdings, but a portion of the land around the central buildings remained. An area of Dallas Mountain was transferred to Miss Anna Douglas Gordon, of whom nothing is known. A Sarah Gordon was also connected with Gordon Dallas, with Good Gordon Castle. There is a belief which has not yet been which has not yet been substantiated that Gordon used to meet Bogle at Gordon Castle. The Kitchener connection, another famous name connected with Dallas, was that of Kitchener, a Colonel Kitchener, brother of the famous Kitchener of Khartoum, owned the property for a period. He was lost at sea. The ship was torpedoed during One. World War I. And that ends it. So special thanks to Messrs. Abrams, Garnett, Ricketts, and Woodward for their invaluable assistance. Mr. Woodward, Arthur Woodward passed the other day, a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Thanks also to Dr. Whitaker. Without his support and interest for this project might have never been commenced. Margaret Curtin, Research Officer, Jamaica National Trust Commission, Headquarters House, 79 Duke Street, Kingston, November 8th, 1983. Peace.